Hello, my name is Owen Clayton. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Leeds. I'm currently in the process of completing my thesis on 19th century British and American literature. And I've been doing that for the last 4 years. Now, I've also been teaching at the University of Lincoln and the University of Oxford. And also for much of that time I've been teaching A-level and GCSE. As a result of this wide range of experiences, I've been able to see a cross-section of different educational levels simultaneously. This means that I'm well placed to talk to you today about the differences between the kind of education you get at school and college and what you might expect from university. My talk is entitled Managing Your Great Expectations: Some Differences Between Further and Higher Education. When you arrive at university, it is likely that you will undergo some uncertainty as to what is expected of you in seminars and in essays, as well as what you can reasonably expect from your tutors. I'm going to offer some advice related to university life generally, talking about how it differs from previous education that you may have had. At the end, I will also talk about why it is worth spending time, even much of your so-called free time, getting to grips with what is a different kind of education. I will explain what the tremendous benefits of doing so can be to yourself as a thinking individual. To help me, I will make use of an argument in an article entitled Free Time by the German cultural theorist Theodor Adorno. Okay, my first section is entitled Talking About Your Generation. Now, when I go to academic conferences, I get to meet tutors from all over the country. At those conferences, the conversation sometimes turns to the youth of today. In such conversations, it is not unusual to hear university tutors, particularly the older ones, complaining about the latest crop of undergraduates. They can't write, they say. They can't think for themselves. They just want to be spoon-fed. Yet, I also hear complaints from new undergraduates regarding their tutors. They won't give me any help. They never told me to do that. That wasn't on the reading list, and so on. Now, as someone who bridges the gap between a generation of older tutors and the young people they teach, I can see this situation from both sides. The problem comes from the way that education has changed at school since the time that the older generation of academics were educated. Nowadays, schools have much greater pressure to perform, and they are judged and funded according to their position in league tables. This means that schools have become much more hands-on in the way that they teach. This often has the benefit of higher grades across the board, and so it would seem that it could only be a good thing, right? Not necessarily. From the perspective of the older generation, something has been lost. For them, education is about independent learning and learning to be independent. They think that students expect to just arrive at university, to pop open the tops of their heads and have learning poured into them. It is as if the undergraduate is like Neo in The Matrix, who is able to learn Kung Fu simply by downloading it to his cerebral cortex. And these tutors regard some students as thinking that it is the job of the tutor to teach, rather than the job of the student to learn. However, from the point of view of the young people fresh from school, the attitude and expectations of these older tutors can seem cold or distant. Having been used to teachers watching over your shoulder, checking and rechecking your work, it can feel isolating when that is suddenly taken away. The idea that you might spend your own time looking for the right kind of books in the library can seem strange. Isn't that what you have tutors for? To tell you where to look and then you just have to go and collect the material? Well, no. Put simply, university tutors have a less pastoral role than school or college teachers. It's not primarily our job to make sure that you have understood the material, or even that your work is necessarily any good. It is your job. Now, this is quite different to most further education learning environments, and it can feel alienating. But it is a necessary stage in your academic development, your growth as independent scholars. I should add that we're not nasty people, and it's not that we don't want to help. It's just that our job is slightly different. And most university tutors would say, and I would agree with them, that the best learning is self-directed. Self-direction is perhaps the greatest difference between further and higher education. At university, the best students are not those who know everything, who does, but those who know what to do when they come across something that they do not understand. The best students are those who, when they encounter a problem, will try to think their way around it, rather than giving up in frustration. These good students, when they come across a word they don't know, for instance, will take the time to look it up. Oh, these days it's often only a Google search away. And if Google doesn't have the answer, then the self-directed student gets him or herself a book of literary terminology, or a book of critical theory. When he or she comes across a difficult or unfamiliar concept, the best student goes to the library, gets a book out about that concept, and reads it. The self-directed student will spend time looking for secondary research in advance of seminars. And for his or her essay, this student will also look for secondary material beyond the compulsory reading for a particular module. This reading will have been approached out of a genuine interest in the topic, not because of compulsion. Okay, now this section is entitled The Essay as Experiment. And to give you an example of how self-direction works on a practical level, let me talk about the purpose of essays at university. And it is useful to think of the university essay as a kind of experiment. And as I'm sure you remember from GCSE science lessons, an experiment might fail or an experiment might succeed. But either way, you learn through the process of doing it. At university, the essay is as much about learning as it is about assessment. You learn through the process of researching and writing the essay. It forces you to become more active in your learning. Also, you learn through engaging with the feedback that you get at the end. In technical terms, this is formative assessment. You learn through a process of self-reflection. What this means is that you need to think about university essays as not being all about the mark. Until you are submitting your final essays in your second and third years, and until you do your final exams, your essay marks are primarily indications of the level at which you are performing. They provide guides to help you to improve the way that you research, write, and think. University tutors don't generally check drafts of your essays as you write them. Instead, the idea is that you take on board comments after the essay has been marked and written. This is one reason why your first year, also known as Level 1, doesn't count towards your final degree mark. So you have to get used to the idea that you might at first get marks below what you expected, and instead of being disheartened by this, use the feedback you get to improve for next time. In a way, this gets rid of some of the performance anxiety that often surrounds essays, or at least it should. It's okay to underachieve in an essay, so long as you use the opportunity to take notice of what you could have done better. Far from being some sort of failure, this is in fact how the process is supposed to work. Now, this might seem all a bit odd, since you'll probably be used to the grade being the end of the story, a sort of all-important final stamp of intelligence. And at university the grades are still important, but more crucial still is your intellectual development. In other words, what you learn. Okay, and let me give a quick disclaimer here. It's not that tutors will not help you. Tutors are available and their office hours are often undersubscribed, apart from around essay time. So if you have anything that you want to ask about an essay or a piece of reading or work from your seminar, then you can go along and see your tutor in their office hour. In the private sphere, you would pay serious money for one-to-one tuition of that kind. And by the time you get to university, you will in fact already have paid because you'll have paid tuition fees. So you shouldn't let that opportunity go to waste. So go and visit your tutor in their office hour every week if you wish, as long as they're available. And that is what the office hour is there for. Okay, we're going to now move on to another section. This is entitled A Different Style of Education. So, What are university tutors looking for in your work, and how does this differ from further education? So one important difference is the move away from tick box assessment. So at university you don't get marks simply for mentioning ideas, but rather for how you use them. University assessment is about quality, not quantity. In practical terms, this means that we do not teach to the test. We will instead teach around the topic and expect you to write an essay on whichever part of the topic you found most interesting. And sometimes students struggle to see the point of some of their lectures. Well, this is not because of bad teaching, but because their expectations are still grounded in previous educational experiences. So a lecture will talk around a topic. Sometimes new undergraduates ask questions like, how many marks will I get for mentioning Freud? Or what are we learning this for? Or will this be in the exam? Now, these are not bad questions as such, but they are predicated upon a certain view of education. Education as an instrument, or instrumental education. By instrumental education, I mean a kind of learning in which knowledge is passed on for a particular purpose, usually an exam. Now, we don't move away from this entirely at degree level, and we will, of course, teach you the required knowledge that you need for your exams. But if this were all that we do, then we would not be doing our jobs properly. We are trying to do something that is both slightly more vague and yet more profound than instrumental education. We are trying to get you to think for yourselves, to think critically. For example, if you're doing an English literature degree, then your tutors will probably perform close readings of particular poems during lectures. They will do this not so that you simply remember everything they say and then regurgitate it in an essay or an exam. Instead, close readings are designed to give you examples of the kind of thing that we want you to be able to do. An example of qualitative rather than quantitative work is the way that students use ideas in their essays. First-year undergraduates often throw 3 or 4 different literary theories into a single essay, hoping that the sheer number of theories will somehow impress the marker. And this is a kind of academic name-dropping, and I'm afraid that this approach will not work at university. It is much better to choose a smaller number of literary theorists and to spend time explaining their ideas thoroughly. Concomitant with this, new students often fail to explain what the concepts they are using actually mean. They hope that simply saying hegemony or post-structuralism over and over again will gain them marks. Again, this is not the right approach. You need to explain concepts properly and in depth. This means that you often need to define your key terms, e.g., what does hegemony actually mean, before you get into the substance of your main argument.